Hello, I'm your host Griffin, and today's topic is Redditors who realized their spouse is a completely different person after marriage. Were there any red flags that you ignored while dating? If so, what were they? Please consider subscribing if you enjoy the video. Yeah, she was really worried about some of my female friends stealing me away from her, to the point of not allowing me to interact with them. It's not that I don't trust you, it's that I don't trust her. Yeah, she cheated on me. The biggest red flag was immediately after I proposed. She said, "Are you sure? Because I'm freaking crazy." Then laughed. There is truth behind most humor. Later she was diagnosed with PTSD from a physically and mentally abusive relationship that she got into shortly after her father died relatively young and unexpectedly. She has extensive professional experience caring for people with severe mental disorders, and in retrospect I felt like she knew how to mask her symptoms well. For example, she let on that she was capable of setting healthy boundaries for herself, and that she was emotionally strong and independent. I am attracted to both of those traits, but the opposite is true. While she isn't crazy, what does that really mean in any sort of constructive sense anyway? She masked or minimized a lot of issues she deals with at first, became dependent, and then physically aggressive and emotionally abusive towards me. After she physically restrained me and wouldn't let me leave room until she was done screaming at me, I told her physical aggression was a deal breaker, and said if she gets physical again it's over. She told me she would get physically aggressive again. She sounded almost proud of it actually. She did. I stayed true to my word. The divorce should be finalized next month. Several lies were told at the beginning, but there was always an explanation and a story for it. Previous divorce, but didn't spend much time with their kids. Caught several times still on dating apps, but said they were just friends to keep in touch with. Never admitted to any faults of their own, and all of the previous failed relationships were always the other person's fault. Couldn't keep the same group of friends. Very charismatic, but couldn't keep a story straight. Same as others. Immediate family relationships were overlooked, ignored. Her parents were gigantic enablers. Her parents didn't believe in counseling. Since her father was a drug rep, there was a pill for everything. As soon as we had our first kid, stress and anxiety showed its face. She turned to Xanax and Ambien. She never learned any coping skills. I was 29 when we divorced. I had an opposite experience. She showed green flags after marriage. Prior to marriage she was very meek with anyone other than me. Her parents were very strict, so even as an adult she was too afraid to tell them we were even engaged. What they said went even though we were living together as roommates. More than once she called their house to let them know she was going out, as if she wasn't allowed to otherwise. There were issues with a few friends that clashed with me. They were pretty toxic and I don't placate that type of behavior, so I am not always well received. Doesn't bother me. And I saw her comforting people who were treating her poorly after we clashed over it more than once. She's a bleeding heart and couldn't stand to see people upset even when the upset was caused by their own misdeeds. I felt like she didn't always have my back, but I never thought it was something I needed, and I would always have hers. She let people walk all over her while I'm the first person to put my foot down. In that aspect we were the most different. Before marriage she also had a huge amount of medical issues, and I was more than willing to accept a life of working to keep her alive, and supporting her as a stay-at-home wife when she got too sick. Then we got married, and she changed. I think she finally saw us as a package deal. While my girlfriend was meek and weak, my wife became outspoken not only socially, but politically. She started calling me on my shit. Something I appreciate greatly. I like learning about things I can work on, but would absolutely slay people who weren't treating us well. We ended a lot of friendships that weren't healthy and were stringing along, because of her bleeding heart after the wedding. It was like she was a phoenix rising from the ashes of shit friends. She is still medically frail, but I think she sees a future to fight for now. The fact that I make more than her isn't just a fact now, it's a challenge. She wants to be the breadwinner so that I can quit my job and go back to my career in art. I did great, but the market was so unpredictable I needed to leave my dream for stability. She is still beautiful, caring, and gentle, but since being married that caring aspect includes caring for herself. She doesn't let anyone dictate her life, especially her parents, and, because of that she has healthier relationships with everyone, including me. I would also like to state that once she knew she locked me down she opened her own kink floodgates, and sex has never been the same. We do things to each other that most churches won't even preach against in sermons, because they are ashamed to discuss the acts. That ring and those vows somehow told her she was worthy of self-respect and self-expression. I love her. I realized it was a possibility since I met her, but I don't care, because I love her. She's extremely emotionally unstable, and the recent death of her brother spiraled her into a dark place. From there she was diagnosed with bipolar, and now a lot of things from the past make sense. She is compliant with her meds and attends therapy. We are best friends, so we communicate well. I love her very much and I'm here to support her no matter what, even though she's an extremely different person now. I'm sure I'm different too, but hopefully in a way that is beneficial to her. It was a hard lesson for me to learn that love cannot cure someone's depression, and I'm still learning how to cope with this huge change myself. People who are married to someone living with mental illness and struggling, don't be afraid to ask for help. Sometimes your reality gets so skewed living with your partner's illness every day. You forget some things are not normal or typical behavior for people who do not have depression or that particular illness. My fear was that her irrational behavior would become normal for me and I wouldn't see the warning signs if she was starting to struggle again. My own therapy sessions keep me in check. Thanks for letting me vent, Reddit. That feeling in your gut, like a silent tug that something isn't right, but you ignore it, because you so desperately want someone to love you and be in love. Well, that feeling will eat away at you, until it becomes too big to ignore, and the only choice left is to see how things really are, not how you want them to be. Don't ignore your gut. Is it a red flag if I never skip these kinds of threads? Because I'm looking to see if I'm actually in a good relationship, because I have no freaking clue what I'm doing. I'm the kid of two fairly narcissistic people. The red flags I've learned to avoid from growing up in my house were blaming trivial things on each other, a need to physically attack or break something when angry, attention-seeking behavior, seen my father throw himself downstairs or start chugging liquor just to get a reaction from my mum, especially if it's a "I'm totally going to kill myself unless you intervene" moment, selfishness, like going out for food and never asking or offering anything to anyone else, drug abuse, not regular drug use, but using drugs to cope with emotions that should normally be confronted. I'm mad or I can't deal with the situation so I need to drink, smoke, etc. Hiding money. On the flip side, needing to hide money, because one person spends all of it leaving you high and dry come time to pay bills. Prioritizing one's happiness over everyone else's. For example, planning every vacation around one person's likes and dislikes. This is a huge red flag in my opinion. Total inability to take responsibility for anything. Literally everything bad is someone else's fault. Inversely, taking credit for anything positive. Vindictive behavior. Can't count how many times I've seen my father break my mother's shit, because he knew it would hurt her. Saying things you don't mean with the specific intent of upsetting someone. Treating others like their only purpose is to entertain you. I basically grew up in a red flag factory. The biggest one for me was finding a condom wrapper in the trash when I picked up a shampoo bottle for eating material while taking a dump. It was only my fiancée and I living there and we didn't use condoms. I was heartbroken, and when I confronted her later that day she told me that she found one while cleaning our adult drawer and wondered if she could put her foot in it. At the time it seemed to be a perfectly reasonable explanation, or I was just so afraid of the truth and heartbreak that I desperately wanted to believe something that wouldn't be painful. We married a year later, and after 5 months of marriage, I caught her in a web of lies that led to a co-worker's house. Even after getting upset with her and telling her it was over, I had a change of heart and asked her to see a marriage counselor with me. She refused and left me for my co-worker. The pictures. We had to take a million freaking pictures of us doing stuff. Any stuff. Everything was on social media with a picture. Every post was my Marine. Every conversation was about her being a Marine girlfriend, etc. It was all for show. I was a trophy. When we got married she quit going to school and quit her well-paying job. When she'd meet people and they asked what she did, she said she was a military wife, etc. We divorced and she has a kid now and everything is about being a mom. She just changed situations as far as I can tell. This was the case with my parents. My mother didn't discover my father's mental problems until later. The why is that they got married way too fast. 2 months. And bipolar disorders have natural ups and downs. She had only seen the up. Textbook example of why you shouldn't marry unless you've been with the person for a while. My ex, when we first started going out, would have a little too much to drink every few months. She would say each time, as I was holding her over the toilet, "Never again." Well, about 10 years later it was still happening. She ended up meeting some girlfriends that were all of the same well-lubricated frame of mind. Things got very messy after that, and I felt that I was no longer an equal partner, but a babysitter. When that happens, there really is no way of coming back. He didn't necessarily change, but I woke up to an issue. His mother is overly involved. She wants to come stay weekends with us without warning. When he told her he had proposed, she told him he should have waited. She was bitchy at our wedding, and when we told her I was pregnant, she also said we should have waited. So, basically she has a negative opinion on us. He is a mama's boy too, so I bet it hurts. But he won't admit. I just wish she'd butt out. Yes, I ignored some pretty big red flags, and to this day I am not sure why I went ahead with the marriage. The first that I thought of was ignoring the fact that he was texting this one girl and lying about it. The texts didn't seem too crazy at first, but he would still lie and say things like I wasn't texting her or I just had a question about work. Then I also ignored when leading up to the wedding and him leaving for boot camp. He seemed to just not care anymore. He was already starting to get too big of a head, because he had lost so much weight. Then on our wedding day he ignored me pretty much the entire reception. His excuse was I want to hang out with my friends, because I am leaving for boot camp in 3 days. I should have just annulled the marriage right there, but I stuck around for another year and a half and it only got worse. Found girls' clothes in our room after visiting my family in our home state and then coming back to our apt. He would tell me my opinions didn't matter, because I was nothing but a civilian. Ended after a year and a half of marriage. He still tells people I left him because he was deploying and I didn't want to wait for him. 6 years later and I am much happier than I was then. She cheated to be with me. No one ever listens, do they? People need to make their mistakes, it seems. As it begins, so it ends. Always. I loved him for who I thought he could be and not who he is. When you look at someone through rose-colored glasses, all the red flags just look like flags. Not different, the same. I love my husband immensely. While dating he was late to things. It wasn't in his mind to consider everyone else's point of view. I am a child of an alcoholic, so I overconsider. The balance has been good for me. That being said, I wish he would freaking show up on time. If it's his event for family or hobby, he is there early. My family or my hobby, he drags his freaking feet. I hate it and it's so rude and obnoxious. 23 freaking years of it. He is not changing. I have adapted. It still pisses me off. But I put it into perspective. I am no joy either. I bet. I think one of the early signs of trouble I missed was when my ex would cook only for himself. If I was home and he was making a sandwich or something, he never offered me one. If I asked, he would oblige. But he never thought of me. He turned out not to be a very considerate person. He thinks about the moment and his needs, but not beyond that. Edit. For clarity, the sandwich was an example. He didn't ask about coffee, pasta or staying out when we had plans. We had a really good 10-year relationship and I still like him as a person. He is just not a great partner. Everyone wants something different in their significant other. For me it was important that I was a consideration in his life. It was just a symptom, not the problem itself. It is just a red flag to make one consider their partner's other actions. Too many similar red flags and it is worth considering if there is a real issue. For me there was a field of red flags. This is just any easy one to spot. Please subscribe if you like the video. It really helps the channel to grow. Adios.